Welcome. You're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. I'm here today with Ari Moshe. We are discussing Chiron in Aquarius, or the 11th house. We've been moving through the zodiac, and we are already at the 11th sign and house. So if you've missed any prior shows.
I was just giving my hand motions for 11. Continue.
Oh, you were? Okay. I thought you were pausing me. Okay, so are we still rolling? If you've missed any prior shows, then we have all of them on YouTube. Chiron in the first house, or Aries, and all the way through the zodiac to Chiron in the 11th, or Aquarius. Wow, look at this image, so powerful. I love this image so much. This is so Aquarian to me. It just connects the tribes, your own unique culture, anything that makes you different. A wound around that, anything that makes you unique. And so anyway, before we dive in, I want to welcome Ari Moshe back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And gosh, we're almost finished. It's been so awesome having you here with me every month, just about. So anything you'd like to announce before we jump in?
I still have a few spots left in my January chart interpretation course. So check that out on my website, my Teachable page. You can contact me. And I got an album coming out like this week or next. So yay.
Yay, that's so, and you will be announcing it. I will be announcing it. And it's going to be awesome. Just in time, we were talking about Jupiter and Venus, or conjunct Venus does connect to music. And it's right on your Neptune. So I know it's going to have a healing influence on those who listen to all. You poured your heart and soul into this thing. And so I'm very excited to get a hold of this one and let others know about it. All right, so January chart interpretation class also. If any of those of you have been studying EA, I highly recommend Ari Moshe as a teacher for helping you clearly understand how to get in and out of a chart. So I just wrote myself a note to let people know about that.
Oh, thank you.
Is this online or is it live?
Online.
Okay. Excellent. All right, let's get going then. Chiron in Aquarius in the 11th house.
So when we look at the 11th house, we have to appreciate that everything in creation reflects the individuality and intelligence of creation. But there's nothing that exists that is just like some arbitrary, loose expression of life. That everything is a manifestation of source of creative intelligence. And whether we're looking at a body, or we're looking at a particular personality structure, or a constellation in the sky, anything that we look towards, there's this quality of uniqueness. Everything is completely unique. And the soul itself is completely unique. That the soul is its own individual. And that individuality is inherent to its own nature. It's actually that soul individuality that creates the thread of each soul's incarnational experience. Our own unraveling, our own karmic path, our own path to awakening is really unique to how we're interfacing with our own true nature, who we are as we are created to be. And the 11th house really reflects, if everything is just its own individual expression of source creative intelligence, we can sort of look at life before we include time and structure and form, and just see that everything's sort of like an archetypal energy, like a matrix being placed on top of life. These are these universal archetypes, essences that manifest on every level and every size scale. And so we can look at life in a sort of impersonal way and start to become aware of things as they actually are. What are things according to their own nature before we condition it, before we give it a whole bunch of classifications, and the Mercury function comes in to give it names, and the Saturn function comes in which says, well, you have to conform and live in a certain way and all that kind of stuff. If we look up, at each planet has its own essence, but it exists in community with all of the other planets. And so I like to call that an ecosystem, and that the 11th house Aquarius archetype really reflects the ecosystem of this one reality. Like, there's one reality, and all of its expressions are in community with one another. Like, we're all here together. And you can look at that in terms of like where you're living and the people around you, your neighbors, right? Your extended family, the friends you have, the different circles in your life. You know, Saturn's hanging out, but Pluto's there too. Like, they're all part of the same solar system, but you can go super cosmic with it. It doesn't really matter if you're going like small scale or large scale. We have our solar system, and then there are other solar systems, there are other galaxies, and it's all contained within the one universe. And Jeffrey Wolf Green teaches something important about the 11th house and the Aquarius archetype, is that it also corresponds to the inner community. That all the characters in our life, all the people and the different personalities that are manifesting, if we understand that these are all just archetypal expressions of the one creation, and they're inside and outside, they're everywhere, we can appreciate that the micro and the macro are kind of the same thing. And the Aquarius 11th house archetype teaches us that all of the community is inside of us. All the different elements of the universe are contained within each one of us. And understanding that is a very important principle. I remember once reading something he wrote to the likes of, this is not a direct quote, but you can possibly help me with this. Very few people recognize the inner community. And when that's recognized, there's an ability to live with oneself without looking on the outside for, do I belong? Do I fit in? Where's my community? Where's my tribe? Where's my people? Because it's understood that belonging and tribe is an intrinsic quality to life, and that it's all inside of us, all these different characters. And, you know, the 11th house Aquarius also speaks to dreams in the sense that it corresponds to the astral plane. And we'll often find that, you know, in a dream, you might have a dream about your father and your mother, and that's not literally mother or father, but the archetype of mother and father corresponds to something inside of you. Same thing with really any dream symbol that manifests. We can look at it and see, how is this a component of our own psyche? And we can do the same thing with life. All the characters that come and go in our life, they are all components of our own psyche as well. We can look at it that way if we want to. So when we're working within the 11th house Aquarius archetype, the intention on one level is to liberate from conditioned constructs, anything that keeps us from our true individual nature. And thus there's a liberation, there's an awakening that occurs in this archetype that corresponds to the pure seeing of what we are, of what is, without trying to make it something. It's an objective consciousness that is removed from any kind of personal subjective interference and interpretation and conditioning, which means we're really liberating from the need to belong and the need to know, the need to have context. We all have different friends, we all have different communities, we all have different circles that we are a part of. But when we say, like, this is my community, and I define myself as this, socially, this is who I am, which a lot of people do, right? It can be your political party, it can be, you know, the way you eat food, or whatever. It's not a totally accurate statement to who you are. It's describing one facet of what's arising. But if we define ourselves according to a group of people or to a community, we take this sort of intrinsic, self-evident process and phenomena of community and interrelationship, and we give it an identity. And what we find is, in all our little circles that we're a part of, we can't really possess it, we can't really grab it, we can't really say, like, this is, you know, because every single individual person in that community is their own individual, but there's a shared resonance that brings them together for a time, for a place, for a reason. And that is true for all things in creation. When we let go of trying to create belonging or form identity around belonging, we realize belonging is an innate process. It's an innate experience. Like, I'm here and I just notice, what is happening around me? Like, where is community showing up right now? And it's just sort of there, right? It's just a part of what happened. Then we learn how to live in relation to it. So one last thing is friendliness is a quality of the 11th house in Aquarius, because friendliness is a way of acknowledging the manifestation of external reality and all these different characters, and knowing that we're all here together in this one ecosystem of reality, whether it's an extended family or your neighbors, or you're in a church and there's a synagogue next door, and different communities that are connecting with each other. And however it is, the consciousness of friendliness basically says we're all here together. And if we can share with each other and learn to respect one another and our differences and all of that, then in a way we're respecting this greater and more cosmic, more universal law of this is all one giant cosmic community reflecting the mind of Creator. Like, this is, you want to know how God's mind works? Start to see all of reality for what it is, which is hard to do, because to give the metaphor, it's like we're standing on the foot of the mountain and we only see what's right in front of us, meaning our consciousness is so conditioned by the immediacy of time and space that we lack that perspective that we can otherwise have if we're on top of the mountain and we can see everything. So even the most awakened beings, there's still a limit to their consciousness. And I find that everyone's still cultivating greater clarity of sight, clarity of sight. It's like standing in a very clear spot, seeing it all for what it is. And it's like, oh, this is the mind of God. This is how the program is structured. This is the network of consciousness that has been set in motion by Creator. And in that sense, we can understand the unity of past and future. And that time is a derivative. It's not a primary function of reality. So we're all kind of learning that. And thus, this corresponds to science. Because in science, we're seeing, right? We're stepping aside and we're watching. It also corresponds to astrology, all things that relate to observation. And when we develop innovation and things like that, it's a reflection of seeing the archetypal essence of things more clearly. So now, let's look at Chiron. I gotta laugh for some reason once. Okay. I don't know why I'm laughing.
I wanted to comment on something you said.
Yeah.
My favorite thing that you said was that Aquarius represents what something was or who you were or are prior to conditioning. That is like the simplest way to describe or reflect this archetype. We were just talking before we hit play about every soul has their own unique design or fingerprint, thumbprint, as Jeff Green used to call it. And not very many souls have deviated from that, or I should say not deviated from that.
Right.
Most souls have deviated from their original thumbprint because of their need to survive. You can see the natural square from Aquarius to Taurus. Someone's survival is based on that. So they're going to conform, they're going to follow a group of people, even if it doesn't reflect who they are, if it comes down to their survival. They're going to act certain ways, make certain choices, be born into certain families, remembering that 75% of the population is in the consensus state, 15% is individuated, which is an Aquarian archetype in and of itself. And so 75% of this place that we call Earth, where people are inhabiting, around the world, you're going to be confronted by others if you're different, right? You're going to be challenged. You're going to be questioned. You're going to be looked at funny at times or judged harshly for it. So yeah. I loved what you said. I mean, it's like the simplest way to define Aquarius, about who you were or who you were before conditioning. I mean, I love the picture of this woman on the screen here, because I mean, she couldn't walk downtown or walk through a city without thousands of people staring at her. Hopefully they'll be like amazed by her beauty instead of, judging her. Why does she have all that paint on her face? Maybe this these markings reflect, well, they do. They reflect certain things within her own tribe that make her unique. And so I think this is a good moment to think about who you are prior to your own conditioning. Do you know who that is, or what that looks like?
And the answer for all of us is we don't.
We don't know exactly what we looked like, but there are plenty of people that privately would like to do certain things with their life, but they're afraid to because of being judged for it. Yeah. I talk to them every day.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that.
And but what I really mean by that is that there's this stress within this archetype to know, which then creates that, it satisfies that security need you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And because we're all suppressing our individuality, that but the individuality itself remains true. It doesn't go away. We're all going to find ourselves interested in certain things that are almost like metaphorically symbolic of something that's very essential to who we are. Like, I have a friend that when he was a boy, he went to this, like, I forgot what it was. It was like a science fiction fair type thing. And he was like really sad afterwards because he realized he thought something real was going to happen. Like, he thought he was actually going to like meet aliens or whatever. And afterwards he was like really sad that it was all make believe, and that he just was disappointed that all these things were just like metaphors. They weren't, there's no real aliens that showed up at this fair, and he was just like disappointed about that. We have people that are connected to something very intrinsic to them, and that might express itself by certain hobbies and interests and things like that. And the idea of really knowing our individuality is a tricky piece, because the pressure in this archetype is to remain in the conditioning.
Yeah.
And so it's like freedom from, and so I often use the archetype of the fool, which is walking off a cliff but doesn't think of themselves as walking off of a cliff. The wounding that can come up here with Chiron in the 11th house or Aquarius speaks just to that. It's this deep sense of, I don't belong. I don't fit in to any group. There may have been peak wounding experience of being kicked out of the treehouse club, being bullied. When you go to school and you're a child, you have a community of people all around you. That's 11th house Aquarius, Uranus. Some of them might be your close friends, some of them might not be your close friends. There might be certain cliques and things like that, and they might exclude you. And so that sense of, I'm just so different, and the wounding, the permeating sense of being different might relate to a tangible experience of that. Remember that Chiron is that seemingly incurable wound, right? There's something that marks us as notably different, right? We stand out. And so this can thus be a sense of, it doesn't matter what I do, there's something broken in me and I can't belong. And so there can be this deep sense of, I don't even feel like I belong in this world, in this humanity. And so we can create this whole identity structure of like, well, I'm actually an alien, or like, I don't identify as a human, or all these different things. And that might not be bad, because these are ways in which the consciousness of the soul is trying to reconcile with a deep inner sense of not belonging anywhere, not really feeling like they have friends or they can relate to anyone. And very often with a signature, there has simply been a lot of trauma, a lot of persecution. And it's like you're saying, there's that experience of being judged and being cast out. It's like for so many years, according to the nature of humanity, the 11th house Aquarius archetype has not been this really cool scientific experience of like seeing things for what they are and be like, oh, I realized that I was acting according to conditioning and now I'm free. It's usually been that if you're going to liberate even a little bit, you're probably going to get persecuted a lot. Like, that's just how it's been. I was listening to a talk by Adyashanti, and he was saying that, like, we have this trauma, but it's not real today as much as it used to be, but it is still real for some people. But in the past, it's like, if you were to wake up, that was a huge implication. It's dangerous. Like, if you wake up, right, if you're having spiritual realizations, that is a huge danger. Like, you can get killed for that shit. And it's what's happened for however long. Now it's not as intense, and we might play that out, right? Your family might reject you, or like we'll look at some examples. Society might say, hey, it's bad, or you don't belong, or you shouldn't be who you are. But there's so much more acceptance and appreciation at this day and age for individuality. And the more, and this is the medicine of Chiron, it's a person through the wounds, through the pain of feeling very different and rejected, still decides to be a light, still decides to embrace their own uniqueness. And in that sense, giving permission to others to be who they are. And when a society is built upon the premise of accepting as much as possible, right? Being accepting and supportive and inclusive to as much as possible, the better everyone does. I was
Mhm.
just interviewed by a podcast that's run by two Orthodox Jews, and they talk Jewish life and life in general, and they wanted to talk about astrology, and I thought that was so cool. They've had
Mhm.
podcasts on LGBTQ community in the Orthodox Jewish community. Super cool, and I have so much respect for that because the whole trauma of the 11th house and patriarchy has been, you are an outsider because you're different, and so there's no space for you here. And when someone or something becomes an other, the humanity, the realness of it, the individuality which expresses a function of God's mind, that part is stripped away, and we can see ourselves as another. And one of the traumas of a Chiron in Aquarius, your 11th house, is um, being so dissociated that they're out of their body. They're kind of not landed, not really here, because they've disconnected from their own humanity, right? From their own personal feeling body, their own needs, right? We have the Taurus Scorpio square. Scorpio's intimacy, it doesn't want to just be a loner and, be outside of everyone. There's a natural impulse here to be able to share. And that second house is your body, like you exist, like boom, you're here. And there can be this totally dissociative trauma, and it can even be like past lives of being alone, not having any friends, and being this crazy astrologer or diviner or oracle or scientist that would spend their days looking at the stars and was killed at the end of their life anyway. Just things like that. And so to really reconnect with one's humanity and to share oneself, that could be the challenge with Chiron the 11th. And there can also be an issue with Chiron 11th in Aquarius where the soul is creating this pain for others by way of excluding and limiting inclusivity and freedom for other beings to be what they are. And that happens whenever consciousness identifies with something that equals superiority, better than, higher than, upper class, upper echelon, more important than. Do you have anything to add to this?
That was all very excellent. Yeah, I do. When I think about Aquarius and 11th house, it connects to our nervous system, which is the signal that your soul sends out to the world that tells the world who you are.
Mm,
If you are repressing that originality of who you are, then the signal might come out a little fuzzy or with static or a little distorted. Maybe people won't quite know who you are because of that. It's like putting a mute inside of a trumpet, trying to play it. It dumbs it down a little, makes the sound a little different. That's what happens when we're affected by our own conditioning.
yeah.
But we all have a signal. We have a song. We have a message and a way of expressing ourselves. And so it's interesting when you were talking about bullying and people not being accepted by the group, the cliques that occur. If anyone has Uranus retrograde natally or strong aspects to Uranus, your very vibration will be repelling people with for a reason. This is because, you know, as much as your soul may want to fit in, you aren't wired to fit in, because that might be a life where your whole intention is just to be who you are no matter what, and to be a group of one if necessary. I mean, it's hard if you've got a lot of Libra energy in your chart and you've come in with Uranus retrograde. Maybe you have Venus in Aquarius, and you do want to be part of the group. Your memories are telling you that's what home is like for you, or family is like for you, my people, my tribe. But, you know, maybe you're born into a culture where nobody feels like you at all. So you start to bend and break ultimately to try and be a part of something, even if it doesn't reflect who you are. And so remember that, you know, you're coming into this life, you may have to experience that, the people not allowing you into the group, so you can just honor who you are anyway. And it's not easy, you know, to feel alone in the world, but
That's it, yeah.
I can assure you that even in that group, you will feel alone if you have Uranus retrograde or the strong Aquarian signature. You know, many people have talked about being in a group and still feeling alone, being at a party and still feeling alone, you know, being in a crowd and still feeling alone. There's a reason for that. So I definitely feel like Chiron and Aquarius, you know, well, we've talked about a lot of what this means, but absolutely can be a soul who's trying to find their people. You know, really, there's just a wound around. I just don't feel like, I don't know where they are, but I haven't found them yet.
I want to make a note on this, which is when there's this emphasis on belonging or not belonging, like, you know, being at a party, being in a room of people, and there's a feeling of loneliness. It's interesting because what I find exists at the root of that is this projection that these people are supposed to resonate with me in the ways that I'm wanting them to. And when we let go of that, there is a lot more freedom and space to appreciate where the resonances are. And that can be a deep healing experience, which means, especially with Chiron there, to seemingly be different than what the mind projects as everyone's like this, but I'm here. But to not stay there, because when you focus on that, it still keeps the individual suppressed. But just being oneself means simultaneously the mind isn't looking at how different they are from everyone else. So that awareness of differences can be an unconscious way of protecting and shielding and guarding oneself from vulnerability. But the gift that's shared and really being true to oneself means there's no consciousness, no energy being directed towards people aren't who I want them to be. Life isn't circulating around me in the ways that I'm wanting it to be. And so it may not be what we thought it would be, but the community and the people and the resonances, it just, everything is exactly the way it wants to be, not the way we project it should be. So there might be a dog. There might be a person who has a certain personality structure that we did not imagine. It's like those movies where the hero goes off and a dog will join them, and like the donkey will join them, and like this kind of crazy character will join. Like these different archetypes will circulate and they'll fall into place if we just let life come together, because it's following a formula, so to speak. Life is set in the way it has been created, and we can't change that. So let's look at some charts.
Sounds good.
I have a little treat for everyone. This is going to be fun. I've never done this before. So let me see if I can do this. One second. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. This is from Ellen DeGeneres.
Oh my goodness. I can't hear it. Hey, Ari, I can't hear it at all.
Oh, you can't hear it?
No.
Oh, you couldn't hear that?
No, I'm wondering if you can, if the people can.
Probably if you can, they can. Well, everyone, you have to watch that scene. And I'm gonna research how to share videos on Zoom. It's when Ellen announces that she's gay on her sitcom in the 90s, The Ellen Show.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And it's brilliant. It's like in the scene, she's like, I don't know how to say this. Why can't I just, and you can feel her emotion, like, why can't I just say it? Why can't I just say the word? And she finally turns around and reaches to her friend and says, I'm gay. But she does that, and there's like a microphone
Oh, that's
incidentally
right.
right there, and the whole room
Oh, my
hears it.
God. That's right. I remember that. Oh my God.
It's a brilliant scene. It's brilliant.
That is brilliant.
Yeah. Let's look at her chart. Oh, 1 second. That's not the PowerPoint. Try it again. Okay. Okay. So here we have Ellen. And by the way, someone asked last week, if we're talking about a sign or a house, yes, signs and houses are functionally different, but they're archetypally the same. And since we're not going in depth into chart interpretation, there might be some weeks that we're just talking about the house. House is a lot more individuated than the sign, because sign's generational, but then the house is a very specific, it's the context, it's where the evolutionary activity is happening. So I tend to research, the houses, but it's the same. So if you have Chiron in a certain sign and we didn't address that sign, check out the house. It's the same thing in terms of the teachings.
Right.
So here we have Chiron in Aquarius in the 3rd house. I mean, just that scene, which I hope everyone will look up. She announces and broadcasts it on a microphone. And when she announced she was gay, if anyone remembers, or is old enough to remember, I remember this. It was huge,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it's not appropriate. And I have a quote for you guys. It's like, some guy was like, I don't care what she does in her own personal life. We don't want her dumping that on the hearts and minds of the kids in America.
Mm.
That's it. So, wherever we have Aquarius and 11th house, there's an inherent correspondence to the future. And it corresponds to the future only because of our conditioning within time. Right? It's future relative to our own conditioning, but beyond that, it's what is, and what is reflects the inherent nature of reality as it is created. But the unfolding and the unraveling of our own conditioning creates the experience of innovation or something new and shocking to us, but it's shocking relative to our conditioning. So, here's information that is of a shocking material, Aquarius 3rd house, and sharing it with, everyone. Of course, 15 years down the road, that's like no big deal, right? It's not totally like accepted like 100%, but it's like people as a whole, culturally, it's not as painful and difficult and traumatic today as it was to come out of the closet. And of course, some people might experience more backlash and persecution and judgment still, but there's so much more inclusion and acceptance because society has evolved. And here's an example of a soul that has used the pain and the fear of her being herself. And she's a Pluto in the 9th house soul. So she has to be honest to her core. She has to be. And, coming out and speaking her voice, expressing herself, it opened up so much dialogue and conversation and openness. She came out on Oprah. right? That's boom. Now she's in the minds and hearts of everyone. People have to talk about it. People have to face it. All these other people that have something to say that they're afraid of. So this is an expression of moving more and more into a liberated society. And she has played a very important role on that.
Absolutely. I
anything
mean,
else?
look at that. Uranus, which rules Chiron and Aquarius, is in the 8th house. It's retrograde. I was just talking about this, that, her own vibration. I mean, of course, her vibratory nature attracts the world now, but, growing up and what have you, and the Uranus opposes her Venus exactly, I mean, practically to the minute. You can see all the trauma in her soul, being killed for being different, for sure, cast out, all of it. I mean, so intense in this chart. And, but that Uranus, this is where I love EA so much, because it shows you a way through something. Like, this is absolutely a signature for somebody who can wake up the world. I mean, that Uranus is trining her ascendant, and in Sagittarius, right? So she's got this 9th house Pluto. I mean, the truth is more important to her than anything. Yeah. And that Uranus, which is in so much stress with the opposition to her Venus, does have, this beautiful aspect to her ascendant, which will, Saturn, Mars also in a new phase in Sagittarius. They're trining her moon. It gives her the courage to come out on stage, 5th house, right, and say, hey, people, this is who I am. And she knows in her heart of hearts that there's so many people just like her that feel exactly like she felt. And it was worth putting her life on the line for sure, and being judged for it with that Saturn-Mars conjunction. Plenty of people, even there's still millions of people that judge others for their sexual identity or choices all over the planet. And there's people in other countries, where they're still killed for it. So, I mean, it's not like we're out of the woods
Totally.
by a mile.
Yeah.
But she's got, Uranus retrograde, Venus retrograde, they're in opposition, Chiron's in Aquarius, and this is such a classic chart, literally putting it on the airwaves, like you said, writing in that sitcom, where you think you're just telling one person, then all of a sudden it's on loudspeaker and the whole world knows it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But ultimately she was loved for that, and she is loved for that, and she's valued for that she was able to take her moon in Aries and carry the torch and be on the front line with her own choices, with her own individuality, with her own sexuality. I mean, 8th house, Uranus in the 8th, retrograde, squaring the nodes, literally being killed for her sexuality, for her choice in that way.
Yeah. Great.
All right.
Harrison Ford. When I saw his Mars Chiron conjunction in Leo in the 11th, I was like, oh, that explains like every movie role he's ever played. Like this sort of like reluctant renegade hero archetype. It's always sort of been somewhat ambivalent and don't bother me, kid kind of energy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have a little quote here. No, I don't. That's someone else. Forget that. One thing about Harrison is, and it's kind of well known, when he was a child, I listened to a biography this morning. He was bullied a lot as a kid. He was pushed downstairs almost every day, and but he learned to just get up. Like, he learned how to develop a certain confidence, and he noticed pretty quickly that women liked him if he was confident. And he gained a lot of sympathy from women, and so he developed this sort of attitude of.
You mean girls his own age, or?
What's that?
Girls his own age or women?
I think girls his own age.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know. I have to listen to that again. But, Mars is separating from Chiron, new phase. There's, in Leo in the 11th house, there's a strong piece here about this soul developing confidence to be himself and to stand in his pride for who he is, even if people don't like him, even if he's rejected. And as he developed a career as an actor, which wasn't quite what he intended, but it happened. He started taking on these hero roles and all these, it's funny looking at charts of actors, because we find, and maybe we've talked about this before, the roles they tend to play are of course in their chart as well. It's really fascinating. And so he, Han Solo in Star Wars is this hero guy, but he was a renegade. Han Solo, Chiron Mars in 11th house Leo, but he's like the hero of the whole story. He wanted to operate alone, and he was sort of that archetype in the Star Wars trilogy that he wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. He was like the outsider that was hired, that came in to do some sort of important work. But he sort of represents that principle within creation of everyone finding their place. But he as a person couldn't stand all the hype that came with Star Wars, and he actually asked George Lucas to kill off his character. But he didn't, because Han Solo was so well loved. But he felt the commercialization and the glorification of Star Wars and the loss of privacy that came with his fame, and the sickening of society and the commercialization of Star Wars was something that was very difficult for him. And he was very happy in the newest Star Wars to be killed off. In Return of the Jedi, his character was finally killed off. Not Return of the, or the Last Jedi, or whatever, the first, episode 7, a couple years ago.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
And yeah, so his career, his life, and also the roles he played have been very much examples of walking to the beat of your own drum, but following and opening his heart to his own uniqueness, his own genius as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
But very much you can tell this sense of like not really belonging. Like he didn't fit into the whole Hollywood scene. He didn't vibe with that. He didn't want to be a part of that. He didn't want anything to do with that, right? He just wants to be a guy. And I watched some interviews with him on those talk shows. What he did a couple of times is he just drinks a little bit and he tells jokes. And I can tell there's a part of him that doesn't want to get lost in this whole fake construct of like a famous person and talk about these things that have artificial meaning and value. And I think this signature also speaks to how big his heart is, how tender and Cancer ruling all of that, how tender and caring he is, and perhaps the wounding that has come up by way of people being put on a pedestal, or the way that other people that are vulnerable and weak in society are treated and outcast. This, I think, a natural function within him, which I think resonates in some way with the kinds of roles he's gravitated towards as an actor, is standing up for the weak guy, standing up for the people that really need to be, cared for. And that's Chiron Mars and Leo in the 11th.
Gosh, the movie that keeps standing out to me more than any other movie, because I was just on the edge of my seat the entire time, was The Fugitive.
Oh, yeah.
And you think about, we talk about Uranus and Aquarius connecting to trauma. He's got Uranus squaring the nodal axis. And all the 11th house Pluto, Chiron's there with Fugitive. Mars, the Fugitive. So he's on the run. And the ruler for his south node in Pisces is Neptune and Virgo in the 12th. So he's a victim of something he didn't do. And yeah, I mean, it's the trauma at the beginning of the movie, is his wife's murdered and he's being pinned for it, and then he's on the run. I mean, it was such a perfect movie for him. In other times this has been true, or being targeted for trying to help people that can't help themselves, right? Or,
right.
He's totally been jumping on that bandwagon for lifetimes. So sensitive, so sensitive to those people in need, or the underdog, or the misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
this life as an actor has allowed him, I'm sure, to just heal through all that. And I love how you're talking about he just wants to tell jokes, drink so little and tell some jokes. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure humor's gotten through him through a lot of
Yeah, I
lifetimes.
mean, with that Gemini ninth house for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I love that he's born that Cancer real quick and is born under a new moon also.
Yeah.
Interesting. Look at the transits in his chart right now. He must be
I
going
know, right?
dear.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wonder what's going on. It's a
something.
big one. I found it interesting, Paul McCartney, not that different.
Mm-mm.
Just
Wow.
born a month,
Oh,
less
wow.
than a month before.
Amazing. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I had no idea that Harrison Ford was already that late in his years.
But what a great example, because now we're looking at Mars. This is Mars balsamic, whereas Harrison Ford was Mars new phase. And Mars is also balsamic to Pluto as well. So obviously, this is a different expression of this 11th house energy. We have Paul McCartney, obviously a very liberated, creative channel. I mean, this dude is just like so inspiring to me, how much music he has brought forth. And he received a lot of these in his dreams too.
Mm-hmm.
He's really just brought forth so much music, right? So much music. And he had a band. So that's the whole 11th house is, playing in the band. You're part of the Fab Four. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I wonder if like Mars, Pluto, Chiron, and the Moon were like each one's a different beetle. That
Way.
would be funny. Like maybe he's the Moon, John would be Chiron, George would be Pluto, and I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so
Yeah.
one feature I want to speak to here, and this is highlighting the fact of Chiron being a lot more strongly activated here. It's with the Moon. So one, like he never wanted the band to break up. His home, his life was the band. He just wanted to keep on playing music with them. And he has always been the staple when things were chaotic and stressful. He always wanted to show up. He would always go to, studio. He was always stable. But there was also this elitist dynamic, right? Where he and John didn't really allow George, for example, to share equally. There was a sort of like cliquey quality to this as well that created its own trauma for other people in the band. He was deeply traumatized when John said in 1969 that he's going to leave. And just look at this chart for a moment. This is just in September of 1969, around the time that John announced he's going to leave the Beatles. Pluto was moving over the ascendant. And then John, then the band broke up in 1970, Pluto on the ascendant, right? So this is happening as the Beatles break up, that this huge evolutionary transition is happening in Paul's life. And I just wanted to point that out because you see Pluto moving over the ascendant, it's really going to be affecting core chart dynamics, everything. So all of this stuff, 11th house Leo, your community, your band, how you've, moon, your home, this is your family, it's your tribe. And all the different arguments and confrontations with that Mars Pluto that happen afterwards, of different egos getting involved. And so it was really hard for him to continue on. But that's that 11th house quality of your belonging has to be within you, not within the external context, because that's going to change. And when he wasn't a Beatle, when that no longer existed, he had to find a place for his big and open, and I would say even innocent, creative heart. And so McCartney was depressed after the group ended. His wife helped him pull out of that condition by praising his work as a songwriter and convincing him to continue writing and recording. In her honor, he wrote Maybe I'm Amazed, which is an amazing song, explaining that with the Beatles breaking up, that was my feeling. Maybe I'm amazed at what's going on. Maybe I'm a man and maybe you're the only woman who can ever help me. Baby, won't you help me understand? Maybe I'm amazed at the way you pulled me out of time, hung me on the line. Maybe I'm amazed at the way I really need you. And this guy, is such a romantic and
Yeah.
really, really wears his heart on his sleeve. And it's like Leo in the 11th house, sharing, opening everything, right? No holds back. And the tenderness of that, right? Like the amount of courage to take all of his pain and to continually bring that into song. One thing that I really admire from Paul, whenever I watch interviews with him and whatever, I see this very childlike quality in him where he keeps it about the music,
Mm-hmm.
right? He to this day, as far as I'm aware, just really stays with the music, with the creation. He just loves the music so much.
But also it's like the unevolved Leo would make it about themselves, but because it's in the 11th house, he makes himself, he's the conduit for the music. He's separate from that creation, although he's creating it. We're all connected, not separate. But, you know, the more Aquarian perspective, right? Not attaching to it being his.
Right.
Being that channel, being that vessel for it. And yeah.
When you hear him talking, I'm going to try to do, I've never even attempted, but I'm going to try a Paul McCartney impersonation. There's a certain like nonchalant, well, oh God, it's going to be, well, well, you know, I was just, sitting one day and had, it's horrible, darn it. Well, I was just sitting one day and, you know, I was thinking of this and the song came through and I was like, oh, this is a good song. Oh, it's nice, you know, or it's a good song, whatever. He just has this like very nonchalant, yeah, I had a dream about this thing and I thought, did I hear this song? I'm like, no, I think this dream was just a song that came to me and I wrote. Now it's like the most played song in the world, or it's so cool like that. Okay.
What is his most famous song? Is it Baby I'm Amazed? Or
No. Yesterday is
Yesterday, yeah.
one of the most, I think, the most covered, or one of the most covered songs in history, or something like that.
Wow.
Yesterday,
God, what a song! What a
all
song!
my troubles seem so far away.
Yeah.
And all of
Oh,
his songs too, just to really emphasize that, he's known as like the lovey-dovey romantic Beatle, and that's that Leo, all that Leo. He speaks. There's this one song, "You Better Find Someone to Love Now," right? And it's that moon as well, the tenderness of having so much love to share, needing to move it, needing to express it. And
yeah, it's that Pisces too. That South Node in
oh
Pisces,
yeah,
Neptune's on the ascendant, Pluto and Mars are balsamic. I mean, there's so many Piscean. North Node in the 12th. You know, there's 1, 2, 3. There's 4 major Piscean signatures here. The dreamer, right? So ultimate love. You know.
Exactly, yeah. And he's another example where, you know, multicultural influence, that Uranus, Saturn in the 9th square in the nodes.
Uh huh.
I spelled it wrong. It's Terence, not Terence. Terence and I spelled his last name wrong too. Apparently I was not paying attention. There's a K in there.
It's okay.
As long as I didn't like write Bart Simpson or something crazy.
Yeah.
So here we have Chiron in the 11th house in Scorpio. And it's squaring the Saturn, which is conjunct Pluto and Leo in the 9th. And this is a soul that was very fascinated with mushrooms and mycology and entheogens and understanding human consciousness, very much combining the 11th house with the Scorpio archetype. And he's a Scorpio sun as well, carrying all of this. So I have a little piece here. No, I don't. Okay, I thought I did. Forget that. His orientation took him towards research and revelations and interest in I Ching, in plant medicine, in mushrooms and ayahuasca, in understanding alien intelligence, in understanding the roots to our own civilization. And he really went deeply in exploring and unraveling the collective psyche. And there's a quote that I thought I had copied, but I didn't. But it said something to the nature of, we have about 10,000 years of having done really bad things, and we're all carrying that inside of us. And that's a lot of shadow. It's a lot to unravel. I don't think he used the word shadow, but there's a lot of subconscious content to purge and process. And he says how mushrooms and entheogenic medicines serve the purpose of helping us do two things. One is understanding our own consciousness and deconditioning from this 10,000 years of all of our deep, deep, deep conditioning. And so, of course, the Chiron is ruled by Pluto in the 9th house, and that corresponds to plants and to nature and shamanism and things like that. This is a soul that was also able to relate to a whole subculture of people that were interested in liberating, exploring consciousness. And he brought in a more scientific, and I would say even introduced a sort of spiritual quality to an otherwise a culture that maybe was not connecting to the deeper threads of consciousness within plant medicine, but seeing it more as like a drug or, you know, a way to escape, and sort of what was opening up in the 70s and such. He brought in a deeper awareness and appreciation for the intelligence behind these plants. And people are still studying his works today. People are very influenced by his research and things that he's taught. And he basically traveled the world giving lectures on entheogens, mycology, plant medicine, and just these different expressions of consciousness. And was he an outsider? Yes. And the medicine that he brought forth came entirely from him not being willing to accept the status quo, but being really drawn to go deeper and deeper and deeper. He basically was a scientist of his own subconscious, of his own unconscious. He wanted to go deep into unraveling the sources of consciousness beyond his own conditioning mind. But this is an example where this can also create wounding. I think he died of a brain tumor.
Whoa.
And, you know, we don't know the cause of the brain tumor, but this is a soul that was very much in their mind, right? Brilliant thinking. But that's the limitation of the 11th house as well, right? That thought can only get you so far.
Wow. I like that, the scientist of his own mind. You can see too that Pluto Saturn, the Pluto ruling that Chiron, it's like he experienced his limit in his own life, right? You know, he reached it, experienced it, and then died of a brain tumor. I mean, that's just, the brain would connect to the 11th house, of course. The Cancer being Pluto. Amazing. All right.
Let me just confirm that. How did McKenna die? Pretty sure it was a brain tumor. Yeah, brain tumor. Okay, good.
That was awesome, Ari.
All right. Yeah, good show today.
Such a great show. I loved all the chart examples. So diverse. Another example. So diverse. So diverse. And we'll figure out how to do a Zoom video share.
Yeah, if anyone in the comments know, I read the comments, by the way. I don't respond because I don't want to set a precedence to like, oh, just. But if you know, if there are ever like you know, content related questions, not so much like opinions or whatever, but like content, like explaining or understanding something, please be welcome to ask. And if you know how to do videos, also let us know.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. So we have one more show in this Chiron series, and we will be doing that in the next few weeks, or at some point. I don't know, will we have it on in December? We will do that, early December, I'm thinking.
Yeah, we'll definitely be, in the next couple of weeks before my daughter comes into this world.
Yeah, oh my
That'll be
goodness.
easier.
Then you'll be busy for a while, and hopefully you can introduce her to the world.
We should have a raffle, like, where will her Chiron be? She'll still have Chiron and Aries squaring the nodes, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, can't wait to see that chart.
Can't wait to see the birth. Yeah,
and the birth and the baby and the soul, and you can hold her up to the video.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ari. I look forward to next time, and we'll be looking at Chiron and Pisces of the 12th house. Until then, namaste.